The biggest show in the country starts now.
The Stephen Nolan Show.
This morning, victims call for the Bishop of Dromore, Dr. John McAreevy, to resign after more revelations into the prolific paedophile priest, Father Malachy Finnegan.
If you take this at its height, it's negligence. If you take it at its depths, it's malfeasance of the highest order. But even at the negligence end of the spectrum, his position is untenable.
Outrage from victims as it's revealed Bishop McAreevy knew Finnegan was a paedophile in 1994, yet the police say they were not informed by the church until 2006. This morning, we bring you Spotlight's latest revelations into a serial predator who held the top position at a leading grammar school. And the Nolan Show has questions for the Catholic Church, the police and St Colmans College in Newry. And what we're doing this morning is opening up the lines so that the community of Northern Ireland can react to this incredible story. If you watched it on Nolan Live last night, if you want to react this morning as you hear this story unfold, 03030 80 55 55.
On Twitter at Stephen Nolan and on Facebook at Real Stephen Nolan.
The Stephen Nolan Show.
Good morning. 2 weeks ago, BBC Spotlight exposed Father Malachy Finnegan as a paedophile priest. Since then, victims have been contacting the BBC's Mandy Macaulay and indeed Nolan Live Television and now the Nolan Ulster radio show. Last night on Nolan Live, the story moved on. The Bishop of Dromore, Bishop John McAreevy, is now facing calls to resign immediately from his post. Those calls are coming from victims of Finnegan. Last night, victims of this paedophile priest, Malachy Finnegan, were horrified to hear that despite knowing Finnegan was a paedophile, Bishop McAreevy made the decision. He said it was a spur-of-the-moment decision to celebrate Mass with the paedophile Finnegan fully vested on the altar with him.
I'm not calling for him to resign. I'm telling him he's not fit to be in the position that he's in. He has to resign. He has to.
That was Sean Falloon. Now another victim, Paul Gilmore. Here's what Paul said when we asked what his message to Bishop McAreevy is.
It's fairly straightforward, Stephen. His position has been untenable for years. All the rolling tide of revelations that's happened over the last 2 weeks since Mandy got involved, and the work that she's done and the Spotlight crew have done, they've just reinforced that he has to resign. He hasn't got any alternative. He's got a scrap of decency. He has to quit. I work in the corporate world. If you take this at its height, it's negligence. If you take it at its depths, it's malfeasance of the highest order. But even at the negligence end of the spectrum, his position is untenable.
What we're going to do on the Nolan Show this morning is set out this full story once again so that all of us in Northern Ireland can understand what has happened here. And there are serious questions for more than the church. There are serious questions for some other institutions that many of us respect and trust. How did important institutions in our society deal with a prolific paedophile in Northern Ireland? So let's get you across some of the detail first of all. Malachy Finnegan died in 2002. The questions that we have are for the Catholic Church, the police and St Colmans College Grammar School in Newry. Now remember, and here's some of the detail to get into your head as we walk through this. Remember that it was BBC Spotlight who revealed that Finnegan, the ex-teacher and ex-president of St Colmans College in Newry, was a paedophile priest. And the BBC had to tell you that. Mandy Macaulay had to tell you that because the Catholic Church sat on that information. To be precise about it, they sat on it. They sat on the fact of the existence of this paedophile, insofar as they did not make that public so that all of you could know, until Spotlight wrote to the church and told them that they were going to publicly name him. And it was at that point that the Catholic Church got it out there. And what we're going to do this morning is very, very slowly walk through this, and you will want to react. 030 30 80 55 55. So let's start in 1994. We know that the then father, McAreavey, in 1994 knew that Finnegan was a paedophile. And here's how we know that. He told us himself in his own words just 10 days ago. Let's have a listen.
In 1994, Bishop Brooks informed me of the first allegation and asked me to liaise with that victim and his family in a pastoral role. I kept him briefed about my visits, and in 1995, I reminded Bishop Brooks of the duty to report the matter to public authorities.
So essentially what Bishop McAreavey is saying, essentially his point there, is that he thought Bishop Brooks had reported it to the police, that it was his practice to do so. And I guess they're saying, but they didn't know for sure whether it was reported or not. Can we fast forward now to 1999? Because that's when Father McAreavey is now Bishop McAreavey. So there could be no noise around that. He is the man in charge. Brooks is gone. It is Bishop McAreavey who is the bishop. He's the man in charge. And what the police service of Northern Ireland, the police have told the Nolan Show, is that the allegations against Finnegan were only reported to them by the church in 2006. So think about that. There's a paedophile in our midst. The church is saying they reported it to the PSNI in the 1990s. And the PSNI are saying, no, didn't happen. As far as their records reveal, it was only reported in 2006. So there's the first fundamental, unanswered question around this story. It cannot be left to just drift that you have one of the most influential institutions in our society, the Catholic Church, saying they believe they reported a paedophile to the police in the 1990s, and the police saying, no, they didn't, 2006. So that's got to be probed, and we'll be doing that probing. And when Spotlight contacted the Catholic Church and asked them to put someone up to speak about this, did they put someone up who, the church put someone up who was around at the time or who definitely knew what was going on? No. They put someone up who wasn't too sure about when the church did report having a paedophile in their midst.
I wasn't in post. I wasn't in the diocese. I think procedures and policies at that stage were not as robust as they are today.
Was that allegation reported to police in 1994?
I believe that Bishop Brooks at the time did report it. I don't think it was 94, I think it's probably 95 it was reported.
But they can't know for sure. And when we pushed the bishop and the church on this, a spokesperson for the church said that Pat Carville, that's Patricia Carville who was speaking to Mandy there, believed, and she heard her words, and she's done nothing wrong here, she's just trying to represent what she's being told, believed that Bishop Brooks did report Finnegan in 1995, and that she based that on a file note that showed Brooks asked for his legal position about reporting. So the file note didn't say he reported it. The file note said he asked for his legal position about reporting. And the bishop said the same, but they can't prove what the bishop did or didn't do after getting that advice. So essentially, the church are admitting they cannot be sure that the allegations were referred on to the PSNI. Now, we said last night on Nolan Live, and I'll say it again this morning, victims will be at the heart of our coverage. A stark warning to all of you today. Some of the testimony that you're going to hear this morning is extremely graphic in its nature. If there are children listening to the radio, please do not let them do so. The testimony will be of a graphic sexual nature, but we think it is important that you hear the devastation that was caused, the horrendous abuse that was inflicted upon human beings in Northern Ireland. Sean Falloon is one of those victims. He was abused since he was a young boy. And I asked Sean how he feels now that he has learnt that the police are saying they were only told by the Catholic Church in 2006.
Well, first of all, the delay from the diocese reporting that Finnegan was a paedophile puzzles me. If you take, for example, if I was working in someone's house and I became aware of a child that was being sexually, emotionally or physically abused, I have a duty of care as simply a responsible adult to report that to the correct authorities. The Diocese of Dromore were in a much stronger position to certainly go forward to the police or other relevant authorities to report what had been going on by Finnegan. But for many years, they didn't. I reported it in '96, but I reported it with fear.
Yeah.
For
and you weren't prepared to make a statement
like.
at that stage. But
That's why I wasn't prepared to make a statement.
But you did go to the police.
But I did it to protect the possibility of it happening to other children who may not be as strong as I am.
Can you tell me what Finnegan did to you? So that
yes,
this audience understands at home, so that every one of us at home understands the seriousness of the story we're dealing with tonight. What did this man do to you?
Well,
obviously a warning that some of this testimony will be very, very graphic, but we're doing it tonight because the victims need to be heard.
It started off with hugging and heavy petting.
What age were you?
10 years old. Late primary 7. And that progressed to kissing, and then...
This was a grown man kissing you?
He was around 60 at the time, yes. I remember a stubble scratching my face. Not only 10, 11-year-old. From there, it progressed to putting his hands on my private parts in his car. To when I first lost my virginity at only 11 years old, just outside Hilltown. And from that point, it progressed to...
what did you think was happening? Like, what does a monster like that say to you when does he try to make it sound normal? What he is?
He tried to make it sound like he loved me, and that I could trust him. And I was getting attention from a highly regarded adult in the community. At that time, I'd just been diagnosed with diabetes, and he was talking to me about diabetes and asking me questions about it. It was all very complicated to me as a 10-year-old having diabetes, but he took advantage of that. He's seen that vulnerability.
Where did the abuse take place, Sean?
In his car, and from about that first time when I lost my virginity, in his living room and in his hallway of the parochial house. And
in the parochial house?
Yes, and upstairs in the bedroom. And, sorry, pardon me, also in his bathroom.
What does it do to a child when that paedophile is raping you? What does it do to your sense of, to your soul?
It took me away from living those teenage years. It took me away from socialising with other children of that age. I noticed throughout that I wasn't having friends like other children my age in Hilltown were having, because I was taken away from them.
How often would he do this to you?
At least once a week. Sorry, pardon me, on average once a week.
For how long?
From I was 10 years old until I was 16.
Sean, no.
Yeah.
On average, once a week?
Yeah, and then when I was 17, about once a month, because I was backing away from it.
I'm trying to imagine in my head the vulnerability that there is associated with any child of any age, but at 10 and 11 years of age, it is unthinkable. And this was a man who was positioning himself as a pillar of our society, right?
In a village,
How did you sleep at night?
back in those days, worried, mixed up, trapped. Trapped is a very good word for explaining how I felt really at any time of the day back in those days.
The kissing to heavy petting to the rape.
Yeah, the rape, there was, we imitated intercourse on top of one another in his bedroom. There was oral sex sometimes as well. There was heavy petting in the bath, in his bathroom. And on 2 occasions there was intercourse on me. And he asked if that would be okay. I said yes. I didn't have the strength to say no.
What would he say to you afterwards?
How much he loved me. Don't ever tell anyone about this. If this gets out, it'll ruin the both of us. It'll ruin your family. It'll be stuck to you for the rest of your life.
So that's some of the testimony from Sean, who is a victim of the paedophile priest Finnegan. To some of your reaction this morning, Fred in Lisburn, first call of the day. Morning to you, Fred.
Good morning, Stephen.
Good morning.
I watched this programme last night. Words just didn't, and still don't sum this up, what's happened to his victims. And for someone to blatantly cover this up and say, oh, I thought I done this, or I thought this was a quote, is just unjustifiable.
Well, the Catholic Church would say, look, we've invited them onto the programme, by the way, but let me try to represent what they would say in the absence of them being here. They would say that there was no cover-up, that they think that Brooks might have reported it to the police.
Stephen, my argument to that is, if I say, I think I done my best to do something, if I think I done it, if I think it was done and I did not check it, something as severe as that, especially around that time, around Brendan Smith's allegations and everything.
So it was after Smith, that's the point.
That's what I'm saying. After that was all made, for someone to turn around and cover up and say, I think, or we think it was done, is not good enough. Secondly, I think priests are treated badly by the Catholic Church and nuns because they're segregated from society. They're not allowed to marry. They're not allowed to enjoy life to its full, to have families of their own, to bring people into this world. And I think in this day and age, where we're looking at different things like same-sex marriage and different things like that, I think the Catholic Church needs to take a look at their own system and allow priests.
Fred, thank you. Good morning to you. 03030 80 55 55. There's a lot more to come this morning. And just to remind you, both BBC Spotlight and ourselves, we are receiving communication from more victims of Finnegan. And there will be more programming on that in the coming days here on the Nolan radio show. Mervyn in Hollywood. Good morning to you, Mervyn.
Good morning, Stephen. First and foremost, I want to congratulate you and Mandy Macaulay especially for the work that they've done to bring this to the people. Seeing that man last night, Sean, in the studio, the man is devastated. It's as simple as that. And how anybody can treat a fellow human being that way is just beyond belief. What happens now, I don't know if anybody knows the answer to that.
Well, what I want to flush out, And there's, as I say, there's lots more to come that we want to flush out. But this first bit of the story that we've gone over with you all this morning, it is not a tenable position to just leave in the air the church saying that they think they reported a paedophile in the 1990s, and the police service of Northern Ireland saying wasn't until 2006. So who's writing this?
Well, that's exactly it. What I wanted to ask you last night, I know we're short of time, but is it possible that members of the Board of Governors of that school down there, and wherever?
No. We haven't got to the Board of Governors of we haven't got to the bit of the story about St Colmans yet. Mm-hmm. And in terms of the Board of Governors, we simply do not have information to suggest that they knew about this. So just trust me, Mervyn, that what we need to do today is talk about what we know. And I think that's very important that we do so. I'll tell you what, let's
very
actually...
hard to, Stephen. It's really hard to. It was devastating. And the audience you seen last night, the people just didn't know what was going on. They were devastated.
Let's move on to the next part of this story. And it is about St Colmans School in Newry. Now remember, Bishop McAreavey knew that Father Finnegan was a paedophile since 1994. Bishop McAreavey is also the chair of the Board of Governors of St Colmans School in Newry. And as I said to Mervyn, we cannot put any responsibility on the school's Board of Governors because we do not know that they knew about Finnegan. But we do know that Bishop McAreavey, as the chair of that Board of Governors in that school, knew that Malachy Finnegan was a paedophile since 1994. Just to clarify, the school's full name is St Colmans College in Newry. And here's now the second part of this story. The paedophile, Malachy Finnegan, was featured in framed photographs that hung around the school's walls. Photographs of a known paedophile for all of the children to see hanging on the walls of St Colmans School. And when were they dropped down? When were they taken off the walls? Just a couple of months ago, 2017. Our reporter Nicola Weir is standing outside St Colmans College in Newry. Nicola, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen. Yes, as you say, I'm here outside the gates of St Colmans College in the heart of Newry. It's on the Armagh Road. It's a city waking up to the aftermath of that very hard-hitting Nolan live show last night, Stephen. Now, just think about this, and think about this, everybody that's listening. Photographs of a known paedophile, Father Malachy Finnegan, who was a former teacher and president of the school from the 1960s right through until the late 1980s, were up on the walls inside this educational building until December 2017, even though Bishop John McAreavey knew about allegations made against him as far back, as you say, Stephen, in the early 1990s. Now, I'm sure there are many parents who watched that programme last night, whose children go to this school, watched it with a great sense of unease about what that Spotlight investigation has revealed. Now, the Nolan team was here all day yesterday in Newry to gauge reaction from the community about those allegations. And have we listened to what they said on the streets, Stephen?
What else are they covering up, and what are they putting before actual human beings, if you know what I mean? They would rather cover things up than protect people. I think that's what it comes across as, you know.
There was a big cover-up, you know.
And Bishop McAreavey should go, in your opinion?
Of course.
Where should the responsibility rest?
The top end. That's where all the trouble begins and then comes down the line, doesn't it?
Well, the Catholic Church is ready to fall down.
Why so?
there's nobody to prop. It says in the cornerstone. Where's the cornerstone? There's no cornerstone in the Catholic Church now.
Hasn't shaken my faith. No, I still have my faith. No. But as I said, there has been mistakes made at the highest authority. But hopefully they'll come to some sort of a, that people will be treated better, in this day and age.
People in Hilltown aren't very happy with this situation, because I have friends and family that live up there. They're actually shocked, disgusted and basically up in arms, so they won't let this lie. They will take it as far as it can go, and the bishop basically should step down, because if he knew about it, then it's not fair for people to. They've lost faith in him, so yeah, he should go.
So that's the general feeling about this whole story, specifically not, quote, not about the school, St Colmans College. But Nicola, let's come back to St Colmans College in Newry. What has their reaction been when we have asked them why did they keep these photographs of a paedophile on the walls of their school?
Well, Stephen, I think I have to touch on what the people have said there in their boxes that you've just heard. People there very angry, and many calling for Bishop John McAreevy to be held accountable. Now, he has since apologised for saying the funeral mass in 2002 for Father Malachy Finnegan. We also know that parents at a local primary school in Hilltown, that's some 10 miles away from Newry, have asked that the bishop does not take part in primary 7 pupils' confirmation in the next few months. And we do know that the bishop says that he will consider their request before he makes any decision. You've mentioned the school here. We did ask St Colmans College when they knew about allegations concerning paedophile priest Father Finnegan. Now, it said the preceding board received communication at a meeting in February 2014 that the diocese was dealing with an allegation pertaining to Malachy Finnegan. The current governors were informed that the claim had been settled by the diocese at their meeting in October 2017.
Nicola Weir, thank you very much indeed. I can tell you now that every line into the Nolan show today is jammed. I can see here someone saying that he was a past pupil and he wants to tell us his story. Let's speak this morning to Declan. Declan, you were a past pupil of St Colmans College in Newry, correct?
That's right, Stephen.
What would you like to say?
Stephen, I was a pupil there from 1978 to 1985. During that time, Malachy Finnegan was president for the whole period. I would safely say that it was the worst kept secret in the college that he was doing something with young boys, at least. I have to say I wasn't abused by him in that sense. We were slapped and caned, but not sexually abused. But I, in my upper 6th year, boarded for one term from Christmas to Easter. And there was a palpable fear on the face of some of the younger boarders whenever he entered the study hall.
My goodness. Are you telling me that it was I don't want to put words in your mouth, so let me just phrase this so that I'm not doing so. How widespread do you believe the knowledge was within the culture of that school?
The study hall was basically all grades, all years. He would have walked into the study hall and earmarked whoever it was he was earmarking. And whichever teacher or priest was in charge of the study hall basically buried his head when it happened.
So what do you mean earmarked?
He would have walked in and selected whoever it was he was selected, took them out for, we assumed it was a private mass. And whichever priest or teacher, lay teacher, was in charge of the study hall just buried their head.
Well, what we cannot do this morning is, and we need to stick to facts, so we do not have any evidence whatsoever that any teacher or indeed priest knew what Finnegan was doing. But Declan, you can tell me what you knew. Are you telling me that as a boy in that school, you knew what Finnegan was up to?
Yes. Categorically, yes.
Did your friends know?
Yes.
So is it fair to was it widely known within the school that Finnegan was a paedophile?
Yes, I would say it was, Stephen, yeah.
How sure are you of that?
I would put my mortgage on it.
So this is what I mean about this story unfolding in front of us this morning. Because
whenever this story broke, Stephen, in the Newry Democrat, 3 weeks ago, the press release from the college, there is a Facebook group that I'm part of, which are all ex-classmates of mine. And this thing spread like wildfire. Now, some of the comments I can't repeat on the radio, but the gist of them was that this boy is getting his comeuppance after all these years. And that was like a comment from maybe 15 or 20 ex-classmates of mine.
Finnegan's dead now, of course. The obvious question this morning from what you're saying, and we are now hearing from other pupils of St Colmans College who are contacting the Nolan Show right now. And here's the number if you wish to do so, 03030 80 55 55. If you would prefer to write to us, nolan@bbc.co.uk. And we're staying on this story, that we can promise you. The obvious question is that if you take what Declan is telling us at face value, that both he and his friends in the school knew that Finnegan was a paedophile. If it was widely known in the school, there's an obvious question. Why was nothing done about it in the school at the time? Now, Eamon, you're another past pupil of the school. Good morning to you, Eamon.
Good morning, Stephen. Stephen, I agree. Yes, what Declan was saying is 100%. I was at the school. I was a younger brother of 4 brothers, but we all went to St Colmans College. And the grooming would have started whenever you were in first year. I did get the special mass. This man would have patrolled.
What do you mean? What do you mean, the special mass?
The special mass, Stephen. You know, the like of Lent was a great cover for this priest, this man, or whatever you want to call this person, where St Colmans College would have had a mass every single morning for every pupil in the main chapel in the college. And then Father Finnegan maybe would have pulled you out through the day. I didn't see you at the mass for over Lent. I think you need a special mass. I unfortunately was asked to leave the music room in behind the main office one day in my first year. I was 11 years of age, Stephen. And Father Finnegan, that's where he got me. Asked me, what are you doing here? Or was asked to leave the music room by Father Boyle, who later in life became the president of the college.
And let's just be careful. I don't want to speak about anybody else. And
Yes,
there's nothing being suggested whatsoever about Father Boyle. So let's stay on Finnegan. What happened to you, Eamon?
What happened to me, Stephen, was he took you up to his private quarters for the special mass, and you were petrified, Stephen, because during the prayers he would have stopped to see if you could continue on with the Pacific prayer, and to reiterate what Paul Gilmore was saying, once it comes to the sign of peace, I naturally put out my hand. But what I was told in Father Finnegan's big, deep voice was, "We don't do that here, son. We show more love." And Stephen, I was maybe 5 foot tall. This man was a monster in size, never mind in other ways. But it was just a big, sweaty, deep hug where I just got lost in behind this man's arms. And the hug didn't last as short a time as a handshake, Stephen. The hug stopped whenever this man decided the hug would stop. You weren't strong enough to pull away from this man's grasp. And you were just petrified of this man. And yes, what Declan said, It was common knowledge in 1981 what Father Finnegan was doing within the school.
Common knowledge within the school. Is that what you're saying?
Within the school, Stephen, and the only blessing that I could see from my point of view was I was a day pupil. Thank goodness I was not a boarder. Because back then in 1981, Stephen, the boarders only got home every third weekend. So these young boys were at his disposal 24 hours a day for 21 days before they got home on the third Friday.
How do you feel about what we're telling you today, that that photographs of that paedophile, Finnegan,
Steve,
were up in the school until just a couple of months ago? How do you feel about that?
I feel 30 odd years later from leaving the college that the college could have done more, should have done more, but I feel sad because I was speaking to one of my brothers last night and we were saying that we were brought up with pride to go to Valley Hill in Newry. You walked the streets with your blazer, that you were proud to go to that college, and it was an institution because there was big enough rivalry between St Colmans College and the Abbey CBS once it come to sports and what have you, and it was drilled into you from the president down that you were privileged to go to this college, as we were.
So to be clear, we're talking about St Colmans College School. Eamon, I want to say thank you because my goodness, what's now happening? We're hearing from past pupil after past pupil of St Colmans College School. Gavin, you're another one. Thank you for calling us today. Morning to you, Gavin.
Good morning.
So let's focus here on the story and what we're asking. The story, and there's more to come this morning. The story, this part of the story, is that St Colmans College, Newry, left photographs of a paedophile on the walls of their school until December 2017. We know that Bishop McAreevy was the chair of the Board of Governors of that school, and we know that Bishop McAreevy knew that Malachy Finnegan was a paedophile since 1994. We don't know that Bishop McAreevy told the rest of the Board of Governors of the school. We don't know if Bishop McAreevy knew that there were photographs of a paedophile on the school's walls. And we do have a statement from the school saying the following when we asked them when they knew about allegations concerning Finnegan. And they said the preceding board received a communication at a meeting in February 2014 that the diocese was dealing with an allegation pertaining to Malachy Finnegan. The current governors were informed that the claim had been settled by the diocese at their meeting in October 2017. So let me come to you now, Gavin. You're a pupil at the school. Did you know about Finnegan?
I can't say very much in relation to the sexual abuse, but I can give you two stories about him that I had first-hand experience. I was a pupil at the school from 1981 to 1988, and Malachy Finnegan was, in my experience, one of the most brutal, evil men I've ever come across. When I was in first or second year, about 12 or 13, one of our teachers didn't show up for school, and there were about 32 of us in the class, and Malachy Finnegan walked in, and there was total silence because people were terrified of him. Now, he walked about at the top of the class for a little bit, and we could hear the keys and change jingling in his pockets. And he started to talk in very explicit terms about sex.
And you're a young boy?
12, 13 years old. I can tell you, it was so explicit, and some people might find this funny, but after the class finished, 30 or 40 minutes later, myself and my best friend had to go and look up some of the terms he'd used in a dictionary. But for 30 to 40 minutes, not only was he talking to us in very, and I can't stress this enough, very explicit terms, he was quite clearly pleasuring himself through his trousers. And that's...
This is when he's in the school, in St. Colmans.
Absolutely. I know from speaking to some of the boarders, you know, every school, you'll hear rumours about teachers that are made up by boys. This was different. There were boarders who were absolutely terrified when it got close to the end of the day because they were afraid that they would be called up to see him in his office. But it's not just the sexual abuse.
Do you know, Gavin, did you see the programme last night, Nolan Live?
I didn't. I'm sorry I didn't.
It's on the iPlayer. If anybody wants to see it, it's an important programme. It's on the iPlayer for you to see right now. Do you know, so we've heard from three, you're the third past pupil that we've heard from already this morning, and more are contacting us. Do you know that it is at this very moment in time now, so not in the past, now, it is the position of St. Colmans College in Newry that despite the fact that Finnegan was a teacher at that school for nearly 30 years, St. Colmans are telling us they have no idea why he left. They have no idea the circumstances under which he left. They have no idea if he left amidst any allegations of sexual abuse.
But Stephen, what you've got to remember...
Do you know of any workplace, anywhere, where someone would be in that company or that institution for nearly 30 years and then they disappear and the school doesn't know why?
But Stephen, you've got to think about the atmosphere of fear that there was in the school at that time. You know, teachers were afraid of Malachy Finnegan as well. The man was so brutal. One other very short story I can tell you about his brutality. He came across our class one day. Again, we were only about 12 or 13, and there was a bit of noise coming, as you would get from a classroom of young boys. And he stormed into the class, lined us all up, and as I told your researcher there, he almost lifted himself off the ground so that he could beat each of us as hard as he possibly could with this massive thick strap that he had. And in the case of one boy, he broke the skin, and the young fellow went back to his desk and bled over his school books. Well, Malachy Finnegan trailed him up to the front of the class and beat him again. And this was a daily occurrence. You were afraid to even walk past the school office because Finnegan would have pulled you in. Now, in my case, he did have a few goes at me in terms of the brutality, but I was very lucky. My mother phoned him up and warned him and said, don't ever speak to my son in that way again. Now, on the day that she did that, I was pulled into his office. And I know now that it was a threat that he was giving me. And he said, I believe you went home and told your mother what I'd said. He said, in future, don't ever do that again. And I was left in no uncertain terms that if I did anything like that again, he would have a go at me. And there are plenty of past pupils that could give you similar stories, I know. But it was just a real atmosphere of fear. He terrorised the school. He wasn't just in charge of the school. He wasn't just the president. He was a very dark shadow over that school for my entire 7 years there. And I was delighted to leave the school in 1988 because he blighted my whole time at that school.
All I can say is thank you, Gavin, for I think it's very important that we collectively build up testimony here. And your testimony is important. And thank you for contacting the BBC this morning, Gavin.
No problem.
Let's start to get political reaction to this unfolding story. Jarlath Tinnelly. Morning to you, Jarlath.
Morning, Stephen.
Thank you for contacting us. What's your reaction here?
Well, it's a very harrowing story, Stephen. I have to tell you, I've been listening on the phone here since 9 o'clock and seen the programme last night, and I have to say it doesn't make for any easier listening this morning to hear certainly Sean Falloon's testimony repeated. It's a really terrible situation, and I would like to thank yourself and Mandy at the outset for bringing this story to light and shining the light in on what has been a very dark period in both the history of that illustrious school in Violet Hill, Newry, St Colmans College, and indeed what happened subsequent to that in the parish of Clonduff and Hilltown.
What's the reaction from the local community, Jarlath?
Well, I suppose I'll take it in reverse, Stephen, because Finnegan ended up as the PP, the parish priest in Hilltown, and I think the people of Hilltown. I'm a councillor. Hilltown is my area, and there's a palpable sense of anguish at what has unfolded here in the past couple of weeks, thanks to yourself and Spotlight. The parishioners up there are absolutely devastated by the revelations. And to think that this prolific paedophile, Finnegan, was sent into that community to be their spiritual leader by the hierarchy of the Diocese of Dromore, when they knew full well what type of monster he was, I think is unforgivable. I'm very annoyed with this, Stephen, I have to tell you. The people in Hilltown, this has been an absolute bombshell for them. People in Hilltown are wonderful, wonderful people. It's a small parish, it's a very tight-knit community. And like any Irish community, a tight-knit Irish community, Gaelic games in the church are the two centre pillars of that community. And to hear what went on in that parochial house, I have to tell you, is absolutely heartbreaking. And the bravery of people like Sean Falloon and others that have come forward absolutely has to be applauded. I mean, like, to see that man on television last night with his lip quivering was absolutely heart-rending. And I certainly would hope that you know, by his actions, that he would inspire others to come forward that have to this point felt unable to do so, Stephen.
Well, I can tell you that in the small hours of the night last night, more victims have approached the Nolan show. Stay there, Jarlath, for me, because I want to move this story on again. There are more questions for Bishop McAreevy this morning. Now remember that we are certain that Bishop McAreevy categorically knew that Malachy Finnegan was a paedophile since 1994. And yet, in the year 2000, Bishop McAreevy, we can now tell you, stood on the altar with that paedophile, Malachy Finnegan, and celebrated Mass. I asked Spotlight's Mandy McCauley to explain this to us.
Well, Stephen, I can now reveal that in 2000, Malachy Finnegan stood on the altar of St John the Evangelist Church in Hilltown, and along with a number of other former priests of the parish, he helped Bishop McAreevy celebrate the 150th anniversary Mass for the parish of Clonduff, celebrating everything that was good about the parish.
So, we now know that in the year 2000, Bishop McAreevy stood on the altar beside the prolific paedophile and was celebrating Mass. So think of this. A bishop stood beside this man. That bishop, Bishop McAreevy, he knew that Finnegan was a paedophile, and he stood beside him and he said Mass with him in front of a congregation that could have had his victims among it. This was a major event in the church's history. a big day for the diocese, and he allowed a paedophile to celebrate Holy Mass with him. Bishop McAreavey, why? Listen to this question from me. Why? What does it say about your judgment, Bishop? We have put this question to the Bishop, Mandy.
Well, a spokesperson for the Diocese of Dromore has confirmed that Malachy Finnegan did take part in this public mass in 2000. In fact, the paedophile priest was vested, in other words, robed in priest's garments, with the other priests in attendance before the arrival of Bishop McAreavey. But we are told he was not the main celebrant or the preacher. But we do have him placed, Stephen, placed very firmly on the altar at this anniversary mass in his priest's garments. And of course, children present there at that mass.
And the church is saying, but Malachy Finnegan was ill.
Well, the spokesperson told us that Bishop McAreavey himself had been very surprised by Malachy Finnegan's unannounced attendance at the Mass. We understand the bishop felt that because Malachy Finnegan's ill health had made him increasingly difficult to manage, that a spur-of-the-moment decision was taken not to confront him just before the Mass. The spokesperson also stressed that the bishop visited Malachy Finnegan a few days later and remonstrated with him for attending the Mass and instructed him not to do it again.
Bishop McAreavey, a spur-of-the-moment decision? Your spur-of-the-moment decision was to put a paedophile on an altar. So you made a spur-of-the-moment decision that that would be in any way okay, did you? And I think that is the prevailing question, certainly one of the main prevailing questions this morning, that a man who is currently the bishop, Bishop McAreavey, he sees a man he knows is a paedophile, and he stands on the altar and can celebrate Mass with that paedophile in robes. Now, Bishop McAreavey has said he won't come on the show, but he has said through his spokesperson that he didn't know that Finnegan was going to appear, that Finnegan was ill, that it was a spur-of-the-moment decision. He still allowed a paedophile to stand beside him in robes, vested, and can celebrate Mass. Charlotte, what's your reaction to that?
Well, Stephen, as the Bishop of the diocese, you are the spiritual leader of thousands of Catholics within that diocese who look up to you for leadership as an example about how to live a good and a noble life. And although Bishop McAreavey and the other senior personnel in the diocese, of course they would deny that they were complicit.
And they would be absolutely right to deny that. Let's just stick to Jarlath.
Yes, but here's
your reaction to Bishop McAreavey standing on an altar with a known paedophile.
But Stephen, this is a very important point. It's all about perception. And the perception is that actions that Bishop McAreavey took subsequent to him knowing what sort of monster Malachy Finnegan was are unacceptable in the eyes of the general public.
Well,
it's all about perception.
The bishop's spokesperson has told the BBC that the bishop made a very comprehensive statement of condemnation for the abuses of Malachy Finnegan, and he unreservedly apologised to the victims for their treatment by Malachy Finnegan. Bishop McAreavey described Malachy Finnegan's actions as inexplicable, inexcusable, and not defensible.
Stephen, I read in the local press.
And he was not bishop at the time, it was Bishop Brooks at the time.
I read in the local press last week, where this was a headline story, that the diocese had intended to put all this information in the public domain, only Spotlight beat them to the punch. Now, I tell you, it's only a very naive person would believe that. So I am telling you now, as a public representative for this area, that I am of the view that Bishop McAreavey will not survive this and cannot survive this, and has to do what any right-thinking person would regard as a decent thing and step down because of the revelations on the Spotlight programme and indeed the additional revelations outlined in your programme last night.
So you, as a public representative, are asking for Bishop McAreavey to resign, as did the victims of Finnegan on Nolan Live last night. Let's just hear one of the victims telling the Bishop McAreavey, what he needs to do. This is Sean Falloon.
I'm not calling for him to resign. I'm telling him he's not fit to be in the position that he's in. He has to resign. He has to.
We have approached Bishop McAreavey this morning through his spokesperson, and we have asked for his reaction. We have asked Bishop McAreavey what is his reaction to the victims of Finnegan saying that the bishop needs to resign. And so far, we have had no response from Bishop McAreavey. I can tell you right now that we have received a phone call into the Nolan Live office this morning that is extraordinary. And during the news, we're going to try to work out if we can get it on air. We're back in just a second.
On 92 to 95 FM and 1341 medium wave. This is BBC Radio Ulster.
And at the BBC News Desk at just after 10 o'clock, this is Keith Burnside. 325 schools have now been closed and there's travel disruption across Northern Ireland due to snow, with a weather warning being upgraded to amber until 6 o'clock this evening. The Road Service says most of its resources are focused on counties Down and Armagh. There's a red warning in place in the Republic, with people being told to be home by 4 o'clock this afternoon. John Thompson from TransLink says there's widespread disruption to bus services in Northern Ireland.
At the moment, we're experiencing significant delays and disruption to services around Armagh, Downpatrick, Newcastle. In the Lisburn area, some of the country services are affected, as well as Banbridge and Lurgan. In Newry too. Derry London Derry, we can expect some delays on hilly routes. Main roads are drivable at the minute. Some estates might experience some problems. And then back over the other side into Newton Ards, we've got disruption to services there too.
The Met Office has issued a red weather warning for Devon, Somerset and the southern half of Wales, meaning imminent loss of life is possible. Hundreds of people in Scotland have been trapped in their cars overnight on the M80 outside Glasgow because of the snow. A separate red weather warning is in place for Scotland's central belt. The European Council President Donald Tusk has warned that the UK's position on the EU's draft withdrawal treaty could lead to a hard border in Ireland. He was speaking to business leaders in Brussels before heading to London for talks with the Prime Minister, Theresa May. He said frictionless trade with the EU is impossible if the UK is outside the customs union and the single market.
There can be no frictionless trade outside of the customs union and the single market. Friction is an inevitable side effect of Brexit, by nature.
Sport now with Grant Cameron.
The Tottenham Hotspur manager Mauricio Pochettino says the use of video assistant referees is fundamentally changing football. Spurs beat Rochdale 6-1 at Wembley last night to book an FA Cup quarter-final place against Swansea City, but there were 4 big VAR decisions in the game, including 2 disallowed Tottenham goals. Leaders Manchester City are at Arsenal in the Premier League tonight. In cricket, Boyd Rankin has taken 3 wickets in Ireland's warm-up game against Scotland and Zimbabwe ahead of the World Cup qualifiers. Scotland now 147 for 6 in 34.5 overs. And Northern Ireland's Gerard Green is about to get underway in his third-round match against John Astley at Snooker's Welsh Open in Cardiff. Later, Mark Allen faces Gary Wilson.
And Angie Phillips has a weather update.
Staying bitterly cold today with a strong gusty easterly wind which will continue to bring showers of snow, some prolonged and heavy. They'll be more frequent across the south and southeast, also parts of the northwest with drifting and mini blizzard conditions. Road conditions will also be hazardous where there's lying snow, and warnings for snow and ice are in place. Temperatures will struggle to get above freezing and it'll feel considerably colder due to the wind chill.
BBC News.
BBC Radio Ulster. Travel news.
Well, that weather continues to cause poor driving conditions across many parts of the country, especially in Lisburn, Lurgan, Carryduff and Moira. In Carryduff, it's particularly bad on the Ballynahinch Road, while in Lisburn there are long queues on the Belsize Road, the Hillhall Road, the North Lisburn Feeder Road, and also on the Leathamstown and Rock Roads between Dundrod and Lisburn. Traffic is bad on the M1 between Lisburn through to Junction 15 at Dungannon, with conditions particularly treacherous around Junction 9 at Moira. Traffic is moving very slowly there at the moment. In terms of public transport, the trains are running okay, albeit with some delays. There's lots of disruption to bus services though. Translink say there will be no bus services running to Belfast from Banbridge, Armagh, Newry or Downpatrick this morning, while there are no services operating at all in Lurgan, Portadown, Craigavon or Rathfriland at the moment. If you're hoping to get the train to Dublin, the last Enterprise service will leave Belfast today at 12:35 and the last train from Dublin will leave at around 1:20. While if you're flying from any of the airports here or from Dublin Airport, the advice remains to check with your airline for updates. All Air Coach and Translink bus services to Dublin Airport remain cancelled, and all sailings between Rathlin and Ballycastle are cancelled as well. Elaine Sutherland reporting.
Travel news on BBC Radio Ulster.
The size of this story, the magnitude of this story that we are talking about this morning is absolutely huge. So let's just go over in our minds together what we've discussed so far, the kind of main pillars of this story, if you like. First of all, there is a public dispute now between the Catholic Church and the PSNI as to when the paedophile Malachy Finnegan was reported by the Church to the authorities. The Church giving BBC Spotlight the clear impression that they reported it, or that they thought it had been reported sometime in the 1990s. The Police Service of Northern Ireland saying that their records show that it wasn't reported until 2006. Now, the reporting of a paedophile is so important. We know why. Because a paedophile often, very rarely does a paedophile abuse one child. A paedophile goes on to abuse many others. And so this programme is calling for absolute clarification from both the Catholic Church and the PSNI as to what happened here. Secondly, you now know that despite the fact that Bishop McAreavey was chair of the Board of Governors of St Colmans College, Newry, and knew that Malachy Finnegan was a paedophile since 1994, photographs of that paedophile remained in St Colmans College, Newry on the school walls until just a couple of months ago. Photographs of a paedophile in a school. You also know, the third pillar that we've brought to you, you also know that despite Bishop McAreavey knowing that Malachy Finnegan was a paedophile, that he made, in his spokesperson's words, a spur-of-the-moment decision that Malachy Finnegan could stand beside him, robed, vested, in a concelebration of Mass. A paedophile concelebrating Mass, and Bishop McAreavey tolerating that. Taking the decision, spur of the moment or not, that that man could stand on that altar, that paedophile could stand beside him, with Bishop McAreavey there knowing he was standing beside a paedophile. He was the bishop. Let me speak. You are going to hear within the next 2 minutes an extraordinary call from a former pupil of St Colmans College. But let me speak before we do so to the Irish News columnist Alison Morris. We've gone, Alison, to representative of Bishop McAreavey again within the last few minutes and asked for their reaction to the calls from the victims for him to go. And we've also offered him a full opportunity to come onto this programme and speak publicly. What's your reaction to what you're hearing, Alison?
I think from the Irish News' point of view, we've been covering this story as well, and the reaction from our readers has been pretty similar to the reaction you're receiving today. I think, first of all, as journalists, we must always, be minded of the privileged position we are in, and when people share stories like this with us, and stories of abuse, that they're handled in the way that Spotlight has done a wonderful job, as your show this morning. But that sort of abuse, as we know from past and from the stories we've covered in the Brendan Smith, it thrived in a climate of secrecy. And the fact that people now feel brave enough to lift up the phone and phone your show, or to speak to Mandy, or to speak to journalists like myself, I think is a really positive step, that they now have their voice back and it's not being... But what did strike me is not just the list of things that you have laid out there. Bishop McAreevy also said Requiem Mass when Father Finnegan died. And then we also do know is that the church paid for a very elaborate and fancy headstone to be placed on Father Finnegan's grave, which has since been removed, despite the fact that they knew these allegations against him. And while they're saying they did not know whether this had been reported, and they believed it had been reported to police at the time, surely had it been reported to police at the time, Father Finnegan would have been arrested and questioned. And the fact that nothing happened and there was no police action would lead you to believe the police either weren't informed, or they weren't informed of the full story or the full picture at that particular time. And to report abuse to police after a man has already died and that abuse can't be investigated, well, that's pretty pointless, isn't it? I mean, what use is that to the victims, that when they know the time for them to get their justice has already passed? And I can understand why there's so much anger among them, and so much anger out there, and why they're looking at other places now for someone else to take the responsibility for this.
Do you think Bishop McAreevy's position is tenable?
I think that's entirely a matter for him and for the church. But what I do think is that the people of Newry have already voiced their opposition to him continuing in the post. We know that there was a few other moves made this week, whereas the priest has said he won't be staying in that parochial house where we know those awful things happened. We know that some parents have said that they don't want the bishop to be celebrating their children's confirmation after hearing what's happened. And that can't be good. And we know that this happened after Brendan Smith. And we were told that after the Brendan Smith scandal that the church had put different measures in place, and there was child protection measures, and this wouldn't happen again. And what we've seen is that this did happen again, and happened on a wide scale. And I don't even for 1 minute think that all the victims of Father Finnegan, that we know about them all. I think that there's other people who are probably still out there suffering in silence.
Alison, thank you, and please do listen, if you can, to our next caller. Paul, good morning to you, Paul.
Good morning, Stephen.
My goodness, Paul, what you're about to tell us, I'm just reading the notes here in front of me. This is scary. This whole thing is scary, Paul. First of all, thank you for trusting the Nolan Show with your story, Paul. Okay?
Okay.
You were a pupil at St. Colmans. Tell me what happened to you.
Well, basically, I went in 1968 as a boarder, and I was fortunate to have an older brother and 3 cousins who were older than me, who were also boarders. And at the very start, we were given do's and don'ts, but one of the definitely don'ts was do not allow yourself to get caught with Father Malachy Finnegan on your own. I was only 11 years of age then. I didn't understand what that was about, but I was cognizant of the fact. And shortly, well, within a couple of months of being at the school, every morning you got up and went to Mass in the chapel. There was the main altar that all the boarders would have attended, but there were side altars. There was about 10 side altars, and as Mass was going on, other priests would come in to say their own private Masses, and they would pick pupils to serve Mass with. And on one occasion, as I was basically attending the main Mass, Father Finnegan tapped me on the shoulder to ask me to serve Mass with him at one of the side altars, and I refused to do it because at that particular time I was more afraid of my cousins and my brother than I was of this Father Finnegan. But later on that particular day, he was also my Latin teacher. He came into the class and immediately pulled me out of my desk and knocked me unconscious, beat me senseless in front of 32 other pupils.
He beat you unconscious?
Unconscious, yes. I was taken out.
Paul, just stop. You're an 11-year-old child in a school.
Well, probably 12 at that stage.
You're telling me that a teacher beat you unconscious?
Yes.
A Catholic priest beat you unconscious?
Punched me until he knocked me out.
My God.
I was taken out of the class by some of my classmates and was brought round to, there were 2 nuns at the school at the time who were also nurses, and they attended to my wounds, but my parents were never informed. My brother and my cousins looked after me but told me not to say anything because it would only make matters worse. And that priest ignored me from that time until I left the school in 1975. Now, he wasn't the president then. Bishop Brooks was a physics teacher at the time. He wasn't the president then either. But the point I would emphasise is this. Everyone, all the student population, all knew about Father Finnegan. All the teaching staff knew about Father Finnegan, but nobody did anything. And now, I find it remarkable that Bishop McAreevy did not come out or did not put pressure on him to resign as he should have done. But I think it's patently obvious to everyone now.
Yeah, we're not
as to why he didn't do that.
Well, that's speculation. Let's talk about what you know, Paul.
Okay.
So, are you telling me, because look, with the breadth of this show, I'm sure that somebody will hear it that might have been there. Are you telling me that a Catholic priest beat you unconscious in front of the other pupils in a classroom?
That is correct.
And you fell to the ground and you were unconscious as a little boy?
I tell you better than that. I blanked it out of my mind. And it was only when I was speaking to a classmate at a wedding a few years ago when he reminded me of this. And at the start, I didn't understand what it was he was saying. And when he basically recounted the story to me, that it came back to me in all graphic detail about the beating that I took as a first year from that man.
Him being a paedophile, his interest in children, when you were at the school, was that widely known among the pupils?
Of course it was.
Are you in any doubt about that?
Absolutely no doubt whatsoever. And I bet you any of the students or former students of St Colmans College who were there at the time that Malachy Finnegan were there will absolutely agree with that. He was well known. He was known as Floppy, and was always watch out for Floppy.
You know, someone communicated with the Nolan Show yesterday to say that the boys of the school would warn each other not to be in a, and I'm apologising for this language, but I want to quote this of what we were told, not to be in the same car or vicinity as Finnegan, or they would get their privates felt.
Oh yes, that was well known. That was well known.
As far back as the 60s.
I can tell you, I went to that school from 1968 until 1975. Can I also say one other thing, which I think is relevant as well? A lot of talk has been made by yourself and by the other reporter, Mandy, in relation to all of these photographs of him being up on the walls. Certainly in my time, from 1968 to 75, there were no pictures of him. The only pictures that were on the walls of St Colmans were those of the successful football teams that won Ulster and All-Ireland
but here's the point. We know for sure that a paedophile was up on the walls of that school, and we know for absolute certainty that those photographs did not come down until a couple of months ago.
Well, all I can tell you is that my 3 sons went to St Colmans College, and I went regularly to parent-teachers meetings and other things, and I never saw his photograph up on the wall. All I saw were photographs of the football teams and of the various operas and other shows, school shows that were put on.
Paul,
that's the only disagreement I would have with you. Sure. I think that you're overstating that. You're over-egging it. It simply didn't happen. There might have been. There are some photographs of the entire student population with the teachers that was taken maybe once every 4 or 5 years, and obviously he would have been in that.
The school itself has confirmed this, Paul, that the pictures were up and only came down.
Well, was there 1, 2, or 3? There certainly wouldn't have been. There's probably I would say there's over 100 photographs of football teams that won Ulster and All Ireland titles.
Let me ask you this. The man who beat you unconscious in the classroom of St Colmans.
Yes.
Now, there's no suggestion that Bishop McAreevy could have known about that at all, right? So we
Absolutely
get that.
not.
We get that. Okay. The man who beat you unconscious, Finnegan. The man who was a paedophile, and that Bishop McAreevy did know. Bishop McAreevy chose to celebrate Mass with him on the altar. There have been calls from some of the victims today for Bishop McAreevy to resign. What is your view?
Well, I've known Bishop McAreevy for over 50 years, and I think he must resign.
Why?
Because he has put himself in an unconscionable position. He has Julicized this man by performing or by taking part in his Requiem Mass. He allowed him to take part in the Mass to celebrate the 150th anniversary at Clonduff. And it simply shouldn't be. He's supposed to be a shepherd leading his flock, and I believe that he has let his flock down by allowing such an evil man to partake in that particular Mass.
Paul, let me say thank you. The spokesperson for Bishop McAreevy accusing the BBC this morning of biased coverage against him. We have repeated our offer to Bishop McAreevy, or indeed his spokesperson, to come on to the Nolan Show right now. And they are declining that invitation. They are saying our coverage is biased. Bishop McAreevy's spokesperson is saying that the bishop made a very public and sincere apology to those who felt let down, and for his own decision to officiate at the funeral of Malachy Finnegan in 2002. He has repeated that at public masses in the diocese, says his spokesperson. The issue of not naming Malachy Finnegan publicly after he died has been a complex one which the bishop discussed with all the victims known to him at the time, says his spokesperson. They had conflicting views on that subject depending on where they lived and where they were in that difficult journey to recovery. The spokesperson says the bishop took external professional advice on the matter from social services who advised against naming Malachy Finnegan. Patrick Corrigan from Amnesty International. This programme today is scary, Patrick.
It is scary, and I want to pay tribute to the work of you and your team, Andy McCauley and the Spotlight team, for exposing the extent of the abuse, and indeed what I would say is the cover-up of the collusion with Father Malachy Finnegan, enabling him to perpetuate the abuse.
Well, to be clear, Finnegan was stood down in 1995 from recollection. So the Catholic Church would say, look, they did something about it. They stood him down. They moved him to a centre for treatment.
Listen, Stephen, the Father Malachy Finnegan case, it's the most recent case. It's the one that your spotlight is on at the moment. But it is not an isolated case. It may be particularly egregious in the focus of attention at the moment, but I'm afraid to say it is one of very, very many cases of which we are aware. And I can tell you what the pattern is. First of all, the pattern is that a paedophile priest is put into a position of trust in a local community, a parish, a school setting. The priest takes advantage of that trust. He abuses the trust. He abuses children. And then it's what follows is perhaps even scarier, and that is that the system of deference to priests and to the Catholic Church, and perhaps fear of the consequences, come into play. The church or the abusive priests themselves get involved in secret payouts or out-of-court settlements.
And let me just, because I want this, sorry to interrupt, Patrick, but I want this programme to be precise today and to be fair to all involved now.
And Stephen, and I utterly understand you're focusing on this particular case. What I'm trying to do is set this in a wider context, because what we're calling for this morning, again, what we first called for in November 2012 to the Northern Ireland Executive, is for a full public inquiry into clerical child sex abuse in Northern Ireland to be established. And that's because the Father Malachy Finnegan example is not isolated. At the very time when he was abusing the church's own diocesan review shows that in that same diocese of Dromore there were allegations of abuse against 10 priests in the diocese of Clogher. There were allegations of abuse against 13 priests in the Diocese of Derry. There were allegations against 23 priests. I could go on. Down in Connor has a much higher number. The patterns are the same, and as often as I was saying earlier, that they're out of court settlements, that there are confidentiality or secrecy agreements with the children and the parents. The abusive priest, as with Father Finnegan, he was moved perhaps out of the particular location, off perhaps to a so-called rehabilitation centre, and then put into another setting of trust, another parish or school or elsewhere to continue the abuse.
So you're calling, Patrick, because I've just pushed for time, you're calling for a public inquiry.
There must be a public inquiry. The state has a responsibility here, not just to the victims of Father Finnegan, but to many others, to investigate not just the instances of abuse, but the allegations of collusion and cover-up by the church authorities, and also the allegations of the failings of the authorities, including the police, to properly investigate and bring prosecutions of those priests and others involved in cover-up.
And Patrick, very briefly for me, do you believe Bishop McAreevy's position is tenable?
Listen, that's a matter for that organisation. What I'm interested in is how the state responds to this, not how a private organisation responds to this.
Patrick Corrigan, thank you very much indeed. Now, the lawyer representing victims of Malachy Finnegan is Claire McKeegan. And my goodness, Claire, we are hearing from more victims this morning.
Yes, that's right, Stephen. We've now taken calls from 7 victims of Malachy Finnegan and numerous other witnesses since the recent significant settlement by our client known as Patrick was made public on the Spotlight documentary. And I know that he's extremely comforted by the fact that victims are finally coming out and seeking help and finally getting heard.
So what happens next, Claire, from your point of view?
Yes, well, our group of victims have instructed us to make a complaint to the police ombudsman, as it was clear that there was a referral by a victim in 1996. But despite the very strong guidance and media frenzy post Brendan Smith and the scandal surrounding that, a victim's allegation was not investigated for the simple reason that a formal statement of complaint was not submitted. Mr. Falloon made this point very well last night. If the police had a reasonable suspicion of the commission of a crime, why was no one questioned? Why was Finnegan not brought in? Why was he not questioned? What about the people close to him? The calls I'm receiving from victims and witnesses suggest that everyone knew what was going on. Everyone knew this man was a risk to children. So why was he not questioned? I mean, from the outset of dealing with this case, it was always clear from the initial stages of dealing with that particular victim, Patrick, that this would be the tip of the iceberg. As when you have a sexual predator with unlimited access to children in such a position of power and over a period spanning decades, we knew that the victims would be in multiples.
And we're hearing from more and more of them who are contacting the BBC as we speak, Claire. Thank you very much indeed. Artie in Newry. Morning, you're from Hilltown, Artie.
That's right, Stephen, yes.
What would you like to say very quickly for me?
I would just like very quickly to say that I certainly, as a member of the Clonduff community, echoing what Jarlath said earlier on, it seems that the diocese moved Finnegan from the college to our parish, and the people are asking why. And then why, after a period of time of so-called addiction counselling, he was returned. But I would like to focus again on the victims. And Sean's family in Hilltown are a very well-respected family, and I want him and them to know that the community are 100% behind them. And Sean is to be commended.
Sean Falloon you're talking about?
Sean Falloon, yes. You know, his courage and fortitude, and that of other victims, has to be commended. And we must remember that victims need assistance and help. So maybe with the help of your programme and other agencies, people who come forward have to be reassured that they will be helped.
What's your message to Bishop McAreevy this morning as a member of the Hilltown community, Artie?
I have no message for Bishop McAreevy. I'm not out to hang Bishop McAreevy. He has to be held accountable by the proper channels, certainly not by his own club.
Artie, thank you.
But I do want to say that Sean should feel no shame or no blame whatsoever, and he will be very well welcome back in Hilltown.
Artie, thank you very much indeed. As we end this programme today, we remind you how you can get in touch with us. nolan@bbc.co.uk is our email address. We're coming back to this story. If you want to contact us, nolan@bbc.co.uk is our email. And the question remains for Bishop McAreevy today. The victims of Finnegan are saying, Bishop, that you should resign. What is your response to that? We'll see you all tomorrow. Goodbye.